Hi, everybody, and welcome to another session we're calling Pragmatic in Action. Each week, what we're going to do, or each month, we're going to pick a different box off the Pragmatic framework, and we're going to do a deep dive into that box. Sometimes we'll do that by ourselves. Sometimes we'll bring in external experts, as we're doing today. So today's topic is about win-loss analysis, something that we've heard from many of you as a pain point and something that you really want to dive into. And so today, I'm proud to be joined by somebody I used to work with, an ex-colleague, Will Scott. Will and I used to work together many years ago at Cisco Systems, and he's since struck out on his own and started his own on-demand win-loss analysis service called Steel Point Research. And so Will is going to join us today, and he's going to help us dive into this topic. So Will, thank you for joining us. Really happy that you're here today.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
All right, so win-loss analysis, what is this all about? Well, let's put this into the context of the Pragmatic framework. Many of you are Pragmatic alumni, you've gone to our trainings, and so you're familiar with this framework. However, if this is your first time seeing it, pretty simple. This is the blueprint for listening to your market and then creating and marketing products that people truly want to buy. You've got strategic activities on the left, going to more execution or tactical oriented activities on the right. You've got more business-oriented activities to the top and more technically oriented activities to the bottom. We're going to focus today on this one over here on the upper left-hand side, win-loss analysis. How do you understand why you're winning and why you're losing? In order to understand that question, though, you have to figure out who you're talking to. And so let's revisit the concept of how we define a market segment. We define a market segment as a group of companies or individuals who share a common set of problems. So it's not their demographic, it's not their geography, it's not their vertical, it's what problem do they share in common. That's the tie that binds them together. And there are three main groups you find in a market segment that all share that same problem. There are customers who are using something to solve their problem today. There are evaluators who are currently shopping for a solution. And there are potentials who aren't using anything yet, or maybe they don't even know they have the problem. We need to really focus in on evaluators. Those are the ones that they've figured out they have a problem, they're currently shopping, and they're starting to make that decision to either go with us or with somebody else. And when we dive into the research we're going to get into today, we're trying to answer the question, why and how do they buy? What's in the mind of the buyer or user? But we got to be really careful when we do this research, right? Because you don't want to mess up a deal that sales is trying to work, because this is the group that your sales team talks to all day long. And it's very possible to do that. I'm sure, Will, you've seen this. I know I have. I was teaching in San Francisco a few years ago, and I had a product manager come up to me and immediately resonated with me. She told me a story about how she went out, a salesperson called her up and said, hey, I've got this big deal. It's going to make our number for the quarter. They just want to see a product manager show the roadmap before they sign the contract. So will you come out? And she said, yeah, sure. And they went out and did the roadmap. And so the three of them, salesperson, product manager, and evaluator, all sat down at the table. They did the roadmap, everything went great. And then afterwards, they're having a conversation. Product manager took the opportunity to do a little bit of research. And she looked across the table to our evaluator, let's call him Will, and said, Will, just curious how you're going to handle all those new government regulations that are popping up next year. And that person said, well, what are you talking about? And she said, oh yeah, it's going to change everything. It changes how you certify products, how you encrypt and store data, everything. And what do you think the evaluator said at the end of that conversation to the salesperson? Ooh, I wasn't aware of all that. I think I better put this deal on hold for a little bit so I can do some more research. So Will, how do you think that car ride back to the office went between the product manager and salesperson?
I suspect that didn't go well, and a very natural behavior for a product manager to sort of talk in this sort of way, but stepping on the toes of sometimes a delicate sales situation is something we always have to be cognizant with. I suspect that was quite an uncomfortable car ride back to the office.
Very much so. So we don't want to do that. So how do we do it? Well, let's think about that. Usually when people are thinking about analyzing why they're winning and why they're losing, they look at it through the lens they're used to looking through, which for many of you is the traditional sales process or sales funnel. I'm sure you have one of these within your organization. Your sales team goes on Salesforce or whatever CRM system you have, and they code deals for what stage they're in. Are they qualified? Have they gotten a presentation or demo? Are they evaluating? Are they documents in progress and closed? And oftentimes we do funnel analysis and we start to figure out why we're winning and losing across those different stages. But here's the problem with that. That's a completely inside out view of the world. because this is all about us. This is our sales process. Your buyer doesn't think this way. Your buyer doesn't think to themselves, oh, you know what? Right now, I'm qualified. Right now, I've gotten a demo. Right now, I'm about to sign documents and be closed. They don't think that way. What we have to realize is that in parallel to your sales process, there's a bigger process at play, and that's the buyer's experience. Some people call this the buyer's journey. And this starts way before your sales process ever begins. It starts off with, what do they type into Google when they're searching for something like yours? Who do they call looking for information? Do they go to an analyst? Do they look at where you are in the magic quadrant? Do they call a peer at another company? Eventually maybe they get to your website and start to read, and then finally they call a salesperson. And so the point here is when we're evaluating win-loss, just like we would do funnel analytics on the right-hand side, thinking about the different stages of our sales process, well, so too do we need to do them on the left-hand side to really understand a loss doesn't have to get all the way down to the demo stage for it to be a loss. If they're not even calling your sales team because they have a misunderstanding of your product or they never find it, it's still a loss. All right, we need to figure out why, because if we don't know why, we can't correct it. So let's think about this process of win-loss, and we're going to do this together. In order to do a good win-loss, you don't want to talk to every single evaluator in that slice because that's where you mess things up. So we're going to talk to a subset of that slice. We call it recent evaluator. Recent evaluator, someone who has made their purchase decision. So they've decided to either go with us or somebody else, but they have not yet implemented whatever they've installed or whatever they've chosen. And the reason you got to catch them before they implement, once they implement, they're a customer and they'll start giving you product feedback. So in this phase, I call that the Goldilocks phase. We're trying to get them after they make a decision, but before they implement, so we can get some honest feedback. It's really not about the product. It's about understanding the mind of the buyer and how does the buyer make their decision, looking for trends about why we're winning and losing. And we got to be really careful here. Most teams, if I go to most product teams, and I'm sure, Will, you've seen this as well, and you ask them, why are you winning and losing? They would say, well, yeah, we know, because we ask our sales team. And our sales team goes into our CRM and tags, why we're winning and losing. But here's the catch. Sales doesn't really know why you're winning and losing. Because if you go to sales and say, hey, sales, we're super bummed out. We just lost this big deal. Why did we lose? I mean, Will, I'm sure you've seen this a million times. What is sales going to say?
They're going to say price or feature, almost certainly.
Exactly. Almost every business model, almost every size company, price, feature, that's why we lose. On the other hand, if you go to sales and say, hey, great job winning that big deal, what do we now hear?
Because we're awesome. Sales is awesome.
That's right. And I mean, you would kind of expect sales to say that, right?
Yeah, you would. And I think for me, Paul, that's one of the reasons why, sales should not do win-loss interviews. And I'm not bashing sales here. I'm not throwing them under the bus. They are a particular kind of animal and they play a good role in the process. But for me, I see three key problems with sales doing win-loss, and it crystallizes pretty easily. One, they have the word sales in their title. So the moment they go and talk to the recent evaluator, then that evaluator is most likely going to be on the guard because they think, is there an upsell coming here if in the case of a win, or is there going to be an attempt to salvage the deal in the case of a loss? And secondly, particularly in a B2B sales context, quite often that sales guy has built a relationship with the customer, won or lost. And so that evaluator is going to want to temper their responses and perhaps not be as frank and candid and honest. So number one, they have sales in the title. Number two, they're not trained to do win-loss. And it is a skill to ask open-ended questions, to try and discard your cognitive biases and go in there with an open mind. It takes training. It's not something that comes easily. And we all do it. We all have cognitive biases. We can all fall into, that trap. And thirdly, if I'm really honest, sometimes the goal of the sales organization is to enter in a plausible win-loss code into the opportunity in the CRM system and move on to the next deal, which is precisely what we want sales to do. So relying on those anecdotal feedbacks or those single word win-loss codes can often, fail us and not be the best way. And I think, we can do better than that.
Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, we were talking the other day about how, especially when we talk about B2B, these are large, complex products. They've got multi, stage gate sales. There's lots of people involved in the process. It might take months, maybe even a year or more to close the deal. Are we really, and you said, are we really going to boil that down to one word?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, on the vendor side, you've got salespeople, sales engineers, consultants, legal, finance, who knows who else. On the customer side, you've got final decision makers, sign-off, influencers, detractors, procurement. This reveals itself over 1, 2, 3, 4 quarters. And we're asking that all of this be crystallized into a single word. We won because of product, we lost because of price. It doesn't work like that. Not in my experience. It does. Particularly in a B2B sales cycle, it's deserving of something much more sophisticated than that, I think.
Absolutely. And the other interesting thing here is that sales teams have to understand that win-loss is not about judging them, right? It's not about giving a report card on sales. It's about understanding the mind of the buyer so that when we go craft the way that we sell and market, we are matching the experience the buyer wants. That's really what it's all about. Now that said, we're going to have to get some buy-in internally in order to drive a win-loss process through the organization, right? Because if you just try to go out and do this on your own without informing people about what you're doing or getting that buy-in, people get upset. And one of the things that I know you've developed and used over the years is an interesting framework for driving that internal alignment and buy-in. And so I want you to take us through this and tell you how you do that.
Absolutely. In fact, this was something that I learned back in our Cisco days, Paul. And at that time, a VP or an SVP wouldn't take a meeting with you unless you sent a single slide summary of what it is you wanted to talk to them about before they'd take that meeting. And so we utilize this tool called the SidePap tool. And it's a very powerful tool because it forces you to crystallize what it is you're asking into one slide, and it should fit on one slide. And it's a simple model. The situation, here's the current state of affairs. The implication, what's undesirable about that state of affairs. Complication, if left unchecked, what's going to happen. Position, what we think we should do about it. Action, what we should do next. And benefit, if we do it, this is the outcome we expect. And this, again, it's like writing a haiku. You got to crystallize it in one slide. You don't get any more than one slide. Because we're dealing, with executives of many other things than mine. So I use this all the time with my clients, and it's a very powerful tool to make that position. I think we have, a layout of what this looks like for win-loss.
Sure. Let's do a fill in the blank, and people can take this and use this internally for their own purposes.
So the situation is all of us make decisions every day, not just product. Sales makes decisions, marketing makes decisions. The guys who put together your offer, your financial offer, and your legal construct, we make decisions every single day to develop our brand and what I call our whole offer in the marketplace. The implication of this is oftentimes we're using sporadic and inconsistent resources, maybe relying on those single word win-loss codes, or many of us will know, the anecdotes that we hear around the end of quarter sales territory reviews, 1, 2 liners and things like that. And we're utilizing that to make decisions. The complication is we may not be making good decisions. We may be making the wrong decisions, or we may be able to make better informed decisions. And so in a win-loss context, our position is we need to have a formal, structured win-loss program to go in there and talk to our customers and illuminate their assessment of our whole offer. Not just you are lacking feature X, but what did we think of your whole offer? The action is implement that win-loss program, and there's some text here. And then, of course, the benefit is by doing that, we're going to get better as a company. Now, to complement this, of course, we can attack. This is kind of a qualitative argument. There's quantitative arguments you can make as well. If we can reduce our loss rate by 5%, if we can increase the sales velocity by 10%, there's many qualitative cases you can make as well. But it begins with this qualitative case. We need to do a better job of using what, frankly, for me, Paul, is the most underutilized, but the most valuable intelligence source available to the enterprise, actual end customers. So that's my view on it.
Why wouldn't we talk to them? Yeah, and I like how you kind of put it in a really logical way. And those of you in our community, you can take this, do a little copy and paste, adapt it to your needs, but it's the basic idea, right? How do you get that buy-in? Pretty simple. Now you get buy-in internally. You also got to get buy-in externally. So you're talking to a recent evaluator, somebody who maybe this was a win and they're happy to talk to you. Maybe it's a loss and they're not it's not top of their mind to go and talk to you. So how do you get buy-in from that external recent evaluator to go and grant the win-loss interview back to you? You have a little template for driving that conversation.
Yeah, I do. And I think for this is what would, you know, as humans, we want to be listened to and we want to be understood. We like it when people seek our opinion. We like it when people value our experience and our insight. And so we want to tap into that. So in this sort of email template here, and this is specifically for my win-loss on demand service, but you know, you can certainly repurpose it. First of all, explain why we're contacting you. Listen, we're really thrilled we won you as a customer, or more often than not, we're really disappointed we lost you as a customer. We'd love to learn more and how we can improve. And then we want to assure them, this is not about a sale. We're not involving sales. This is not about a sale. We're not here to try and upsell you, salvage a deal, or anything like that. We simply want to get your insight, candid and frank insight. Then we lay out what it involves. All I'm asking for, Paul, is 30 minutes of your time. And I'll be ever so grateful if you give that time. And I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to ask questions. And all I want to do is listen, because I want you to be assured this is not doing it. And if you do that, hey, you'd be really helping me. And, you know, we spent 6 months in the sales cycle with you. In the end, we didn't win if this was the case. And oftentimes we're appealing to that. In the past, we played around with incentive programs and gift cards and whatnot. You run into all sort of regulatory issues. And frankly, in my opinion, I think you can taint the process if you try and put some kind of incentive around it. This is more about appealing to a human and saying, I really want to understand what you thought of my organization. And we find that's probably the most impactful approach and generates the best results.
Yeah. I find that people like to have their opinions valued, and sometimes just asking them, what's your opinion on this, or where can we do better? You know, they'll open up to you.
Yeah.
You know, we're human, right? We tend to really want to talk about our losses. And you know, losses are certainly important. You might have to cast a wider net for losses, just because the nature of a loss means they're maybe not quite as willing to talk to you. But wins are pretty important as well, right?
I agree.
Have a fun analogy for that.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. And actually, I got a video on my website where I talk about this. So I'm a bit of a tennis player. I'm not very good at all. I say, imagine through some miracle, I win a competition and I get a 20-minute hitting session with Roger Federer. For those who don't know Roger Federer, arguably the greatest of all time. Now, let's even further stretch the imagination and imagine that during that 20-minute hitting session, I won a point off him. I know that's really stretching it now. What if at the end of that hitting session, I shake his hand and walk off the court and don't say anything? What an incredible shame. What an opportunity missed. Imagine instead I said, Roger, when I won that point off you, what did I do well? Because we often dwell on our losses, and it's completely understandable. Why did we lose? I mean, that's really hurtful. Oftentimes I hear, hey, we won. Who cares why we won? We won. But the thing is, your win is your competitor's loss. So why give up that opportunity? Why not ask Roger, hey, Roger, how did I win that point? To use the analogy, maybe I've exhausted a bit much. So much to be learned from wins. They shouldn't be ignored. We can, you know, learn where we shine, where we excel, and where we really differentiate from our competition through win analysis, not just loss analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's say we go through the process. So you get your internal buy-in, you get your external buy-in, you finally get somebody to agree. They're going to sit down with you. They're going to do a win-loss interview. Obviously, what we teach, there's some demographic information you want to gather at the top. You got to know your buyer. You know, are they a new buyer? Are they repeat? What's their level of loyalty? You know, things like, you know, did they come from the competitor? What kind of decision are they making? You know, if you've ever gone to our price class, we talk about, are they making a will I or a which one decision, and so on. You know, how much are they willing to pay? You know, all those things go into that. That's sort of the basic, sort of think of that as the baseline of questions that you want to ask. But then in addition to all this stuff, you want to drill a little bit deeper. And so there's 5 areas that you might want to dive into. And Will, I'd like you to walk us through these 5 areas that you would really look for to cover in a win-loss interview.
I'm happy to do that. And I'll prequel this by saying, when we do win-loss interviews, you know, although that one-off win-loss interview can be really good for satisfying that, you know, that immediate need that we have, why do we win? Or more often than not, why do we lose? What we're really looking for is patterns. And in order to be able to illuminate and reveal those patterns, we need to have consistency and structure to those win-loss interviews. Otherwise, we won't be able to, you know, draw a line through the data points. And so this is a 5 area assessment, 4 on vendor side, 1 as customer side. and we pass them out. And this is the way we talk to customers and ask them to pass them out so we can get this actionable feedback. One is engagement. That's what was your overall experience in that sales cycle? What was your marketing experience? What was your sales engagement experience, the demo experience? Were they timely? Were they responsive? Did they truly try to understand your pain points? And we hear things like, I was ran to demo as quickly as possible and the SE didn't even seem to know what I did, or yeah, it was great. They were timely responsive. They took their time and were patient with me. So that's engagement. Number two is offer. This is not just price, although price is certainly in here, but now we're looking at other things as well. We're looking at what was the transparency of the pricing, the predictability of the pricing, what was the offer construct, what was the term of the offer, the minimum commits, all those sort of things. We're looking at the overall financial and legal structure of the offer. Third is, of course, product. All right. And I use this product in its broadest possible way. This is not just software. Well, this one kind of lends itself to software, but here we're looking to assess what was your overall assessment of the product. And of course, the usual things here: vision, roadmap, features, performance, integrability, cost of deployment, and all those things.
And if it's for service, you might ask slightly different questions.
You certainly would want to tune those for a service or something else. Yeah. But again, be consistent every single time. And then four, and oftentimes ignored, and we reveal some really interesting thing here, is brand. This is slightly different from sales and marketing. This is what's your reputation in the marketplace, your credentials, your pedigree. What was my experience with you on your website? Did you come across professionally? Did I not enjoy that experience? Did I find it hard to get things? Did the analysts cover you? What are the analysts saying at you? What's Gartner peer reviews, G2, Trust Radius, whatever they might be, right? There's a whole range of things to assess about brand that's really important. And as you can see here, Paul, we're going way beyond that single dimensional, we won because of price, we lost because of feature. This is a multi-dimensional assessment, and done right, you can get it done in 30 minutes. You absolutely can. And then finally, demand. This is customer side, and it's oftentimes forgotten, but here we're asking, was there something that happened on your side? Change of leadership, change in priorities, change in budget, something like that affected it. Now, you're not just going to highlight one of these. All of these are going to have an impact. There's not just going to be, we lost because of offer. You'll say, you somewhat lost because of offer, but you really lost because of lack of analyst coverage, for example. So this is where you get that multi-dimensional insight. And again, if you do it right, it's 30 minutes of time, and you really want to be respectful of the customer's time and try and keep it in that. Now, oftentimes, I'll close on this, because you've demonstrated this genuine desire to understand what they think and what they believe. This can lay fantastic foundations for subsequent follow-up meetings. For example, I'll do this off the cuff from a recent experience. You talked a lot about how the flexibility of their API led to the win. Now, I'm certainly not an expert in this product, right? But there are experts. Would you be open to a discussion with the product manager who deals with the API? Because I know they'd be really interested in learning more and getting into more detail. And going back to our example earlier on, that's when you have the discussion about the roadmap, right? So this lays that foundation and softens up the customer for much deeper, meaningful conversations, whether it's a product conversation, it's a pricing structure conversation, or what have you.
Absolutely. And of course, this is sort of aimed at like a B2B, but
yeah.
if I were in B2C, then the same ideas, I would still want to know how brand and so on affected things, but the technique would differ a little bit. Maybe I'm going to grab people as they're coming out of a retail store, or maybe I'm going to grab them when they abandon something in their shopping cart online. I know Amazon and others have a lot of tools like that, but the same concepts apply, whether we're talking B2B, B2C, whatever your size of company. You want to not just look at the features or the relationship.
Absolutely. And as you know, my firm specializes in B2B, but I was thinking of an example earlier on about, again, how we have to ask those open questions and discard those cognitive biases. So I might say to you, Paul, you're an iPhone user, right, Paul?
Yep.
Yeah. So that feature where you can press the little sleep button and it'll turn off all noises for a second. I designed that. What do you think of that? Did you like that?
Yeah. I like it, except when I forget to turn off.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put that down as the reason why we won the deal with you. Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be an example of how it's so easy to ask that closed question, because I want to get affirmation for whatever it is I did. And I'm going to walk away. Hey, everyone, we won the deal with Paul because of the sleep button. No, Maybe, I don't know, but we didn't ask the question right way. So how you ask these questions is really important as well. It's open, it's not closed.
A little bit
And,
of
you know, I
leading.
talk about this, yeah, no leading the witness, exactly.
So for those of you that are Pragmatic alumni, you've been through our various trainings, then what you're going to find is a template that we give you to actually drive this if you want to do it yourself. And so you'll find that template for win-loss analysis on our Alumni Resource Center, and I'll show you the link to that here in a moment if you don't have it anymore. But just like Will was saying, open-ended questions, high-gain questions that return a lot of information, as opposed to closed-ended, low-gain questions that return very little. That's always our focus. You don't want to ask yes/no questions. You always want to make it open-ended, cannot be answered with a yes/no. And it's really focused on how the buyer makes decisions. You know, what is in their mind. So you're trying to like put yourself into their shoes and walk a mile or a kilometer in their shoes and figure out what's going on with them, right? What do they type into Google? Where do they turn for their research? You know, that's really what you want to know coming out of a win-loss. So if you're an Alumni Resource Center, you'll find the link to it right here. Pragmaticinstitute.com/alumni. You'll find the template for win-loss analysis on there. You'll also find a bunch of other stuff. But just to finish this up, Will, in his process of doing win-loss, has his own set of tools and templates and provides some other sort of cuts or views on the data. And there was one thing in particular that, you know, I think some of you who are watching this might like to replicate when you do it yourself. And will share some of this template with you after the call today. But I wanted to show this to you because, Will, I wanted you to describe this this measurement of internal versus external perceptions and how this is important in assessing your win-loss.
Yeah, this can be an uncomfortable thing for one of my clients to look at, but it's a very important thing. So when we begin our process, the first thing we ask is, and I'm going to imagine that you're my direct client here, Paul. Let's say you're the sales guy. I'm going to say, Paul, why did we lose, or why did we win, whatever it might be, and I want you to score us. There's two things we do here. One, we identify that some of those factors, so in this case here, we're looking at a loss report, but some of those factors might have actually detracted away from the loss. So we really, really liked your product despite the final loss, or we really, really didn't like your price despite the final win. So we have this -3 to +3 scoring scale. But the first thing I do is say, hey, Paul, you're the sales guy. Why do you think we lost the deal? And these are the black dots you see here. You know, Paul would enter in what he thinks are the reasons why we won or lost. And then we ask exactly the same question of the end customer as well. Why did you win? Or why did they win? Why did they lose? And as you can see here, and this is a real life example, you can see the delta. So in this case here, and this is not made up, Paul rated that, you know, the engagement, the sales engagement slightly detracted from the loss. Our sales engagement was awesome. Actually, the customer said it actually contributed towards the loss. In terms of the offer, Paul assessed, hey, this absolutely was the reason for the loss. He gave it the highest score possible. The customer said, yeah, it was certainly contributed to loss, but not as much as you might think. And then thirdly, product. Paul said, hey, it's all about product. Again, that was really contributing to the loss. Turns out in this case, when the customer evaluated, they said, you know what? I actually quite like the product. And then finally on the brand, well, I'll leave the last one, but on the brand side, you know, there's the assessment. Paul thought it was found. In fact, in this case here, the root cause of the loss was lack of analyst coverage. It was a fairly unknown brand, and the end customer could find no analyst that covered this particular brand and said, look, it's too much risk for me. And in the end, you know, actually, it turns out both Paul and the customer said demand side factors had nothing to do with it. So it's quite a powerful tool. It actually illuminates how wrong you can be sometimes about why you think you won or lost. And secondly, it also allows you to accommodate the fact that there might be certain factors that detract away from the final outcome. And we dwell too much oftentimes on things that contribute to that.
Absolutely. I think this is pretty interesting because oftentimes you'll see a pretty big disconnect between what you think is a gap and what the market says is a gap. And really it's the latter that's important more than the former, but the former becomes important when you're able to hold it up against, you know, the outside and actually start to compare those two. Then you talk about, well, how do we close those gaps, right? How do we get, you know, some action out of this win-loss?
Precisely.
All right. Speaking of action, many of you are part of our PAC, our Pragmatic alumni community. The tool and template that Will just shared there, he is now part of the alumni community. And so we're going to start a thread in the community after you see this session, where Will's going to drop a bunch of tools and templates that we've talked about here in this session for you, those of you that are on the alumni community, to download and take advantage of, that even go beyond what we at Pragmatic provide in our training. If you're not part of the alumni community yet, you should be, right? And here's the good news. It's awesome, right? If you go to that link that you see there, pragmaticinstitute.com/community, you can sign up. And you can join a whole community of your peers that are going through these same kinds of challenges, like win-loss analysis, like getting buy-in, like using the framework to drive better conversations internally. And you can see how they're doing it. If you've ever had that peer at another company who did something really awesome and you said, wow, how did you do that? Well, guess what? The pack is full of people just like that. And experts like Will are all over the pack as well. So you can mine them for their knowledge. And as a resource, also instructors like myself, we're also on the pack. All right, so we'd love to see you on there. So we covered a lot of ground today. Will, I want to thank you for joining us for this Pragmatic in Action. If you'd like to reach either me or Will, you can see our contact info there. But thanks again, Will. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Paul. It was great fun. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See you.